It's been over 2 years since Super Smash Bros. Ultimate ended its ongoing support, leaving behind a legacy of some of the most iconic moments, not just in the franchise, but I would argue in the entire industry. Some of the most insane moments that would have only been dreamed of previously, whether it was fan favorite characters like Sora, Banjo-Kazooie, Steve, the Jonas Brothers. Okay, this one's just my personal pick, but Bring My Boys Home. Let alone all the stages, music, Mii Fighter costumes, spirits, and just a shit ton of content that the game offered by the end. Like, I could keep going on and on, just look at some of the imagery. I don't think it's an understatement to say that the game in many ways feels like it shouldn't exist as is, because it's just too much of everything you've ever wanted. Any moment now, someone's just going to wake you up and you're going to realize it was all just a dream. Even just the amount of licensing was probably a nightmare, but the fact that all of this can come together and work just as it is in one single game is really just a testament to what it accomplished. In many ways, it truly became a celebration of the entire industry. And that got me thinking, can this kind of game ever actually happen again? Let me explain. Super Smash Bros. Has always been a consistently successful series going throughout all of Nintendo systems going back to the N64. It will almost certainly continue to exist just for that reason alone, and it's incredibly popular. Hell, Ultimate sold 30 million copies, so we all know there's going to be another one. That's not the question I'm asking here, but the circumstances around each game's release are constantly changing, and I think can have a huge impact on how each one is received. On a system like the Wii, Brawl sold 13 million. On the GameCube, Melee sold 7 million. Yet despite those games selling well, of course, I would argue they never hit the cultural zeitgeist that Ultimate did, and for that, you have to look at the additional context and environment around each of their releases. The GameCube, as we all kind of know, didn't sell too hot, meaning outside of those already invested in Melee, it didn't hit the wide appeal that it probably could have had. And the Wii, despite selling 100 million consoles, never captured most of the user base it could have had, honestly, as a lot of the games releasing weren't ones made for the quote-unquote standard console buying audience, as it pretty much alienated a lot of those people with its marketplace position and what it went for. The Wii U is also pretty self-explanatory.
It's time for a whole new Nintendo experience. Wii owners and newcomers alike, it's time to play Wii U.
And while it did manage to get some cool requested characters like Cloud and Ryu, the point I'm making is that all of these consoles had one fatal flaw one way or another that led to the previous installment not accomplishing as much as they necessarily could have. In many ways, the success of each Smash game is coupled in part with the success of whichever system it's on, and how healthy that system's ecosystem is. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate can only reach the heights it did in part due to how the Switch helped it get there, if that makes sense. And to realize what I mean, let's go all the way back to before the Switch was released. It was 2017. I was 19 years old, had no clue what I was doing with my life, and now I'm 26, and I still have no idea what I'm doing with my life. The good old days. They were coming in as the underdogs after the universal failure and dark days of the Wii U, and they needed a big new success as the 3DS was on its way out too. It was a ton of uncertainty as to what was going to happen. Some people were optimistic with the Switch, and some didn't think it would work out. They were also making some really big changes internally, like consolidating their internal development studios to focus on one platform for the first time instead of split up between handheld and console, which was a first and arguably incredibly risky move as they wouldn't have a handheld to fall back on this time if the Switch didn't succeed. I distinctly remember watching the Super Bowl trailer from that year and thinking to myself, damn, this thing seems like it's gonna be big. Something just felt so different about it. I can't really put it in words, it was just a certain vibe. It was also going to be harder for Nintendo no matter what anyway, due to that underdog status. Like, convincing third parties to support this thing, which we know most of them weren't there at launch because they were apprehensive after the Wii U, and even just instilling a sense of confidence in their user base after that and trying to get back on track with everything was going to be difficult. Through all that uncertainty though, the Switch would end up being a runaway success from almost the get-go, and would lead to what I would argue is one of the best generations, if not the best, of Nintendo in general. Record-breaking sales, one of the best first-year lineups I have ever seen for a system, and some of the freshest new takes on some of their longest-standing IPs. In many ways, the Switch seemed like it was already doing the impossible on its own, creating this environment that kind of encapsulated everything around it and made it all feel more special. I mean, yeah, we can talk about feelings and how it's all subjective, sure, but I think a lot of people would agree that there was just a certain vibe surrounding the whole Switch thing, man. Something that was just so feel good about it, and that carried to an extent into its software. By the time we got to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the system was already in such a good groove that the hype reached instantaneous levels that I hadn't managed to hit before because of that. Then you had Masahiro Sakurai, Father Smash if you will, please, who's been at the helm of this franchise since its inception, who once again returned for this last installment. Knowing that you could expect to see this man's face every few months when a new character was going to be revealed was the closest equivalent to a comfort food you could have. He really became the face of the franchise in many ways. I mean, of course he literally created it, so duh, but he was there at every step of the way. He was there explaining everything. Seeing him make jokes and explain each new character was really fun and wholesome and exciting. He's been on record saying that this might truly be his last Smash Bros. Game, and while people will point out that, yeah, he said that before, I mean, at some point it's surely going to need to be true, right? Like, plus the man was literally working with an IV bag at times, so I think he deserves a break. Please, Sakurai, please, just take a break, please. Even from a game sense, you have to also think of where the franchise even goes next after this. I mean, you can think sometimes about, well, something has reached its peak, right? Well, where do you even possibly try to top this? I mentioned it earlier in this video, but hell, I'll just show you the stats that Sakurai himself presented from the insane amount of content that this game provided. I don't think you can have another Everyone Is Here moment when you have 89 characters now. Some are absolutely going to need to be cut. Maybe some of those characters wouldn't have even been possible if it wasn't for the amount of clout that the Switch had gained. This leads to the next question of what will the next game even be? Will it be a reboot? Like, where do they go back to? Do they go back to a smaller core cast of characters and try to innovate in other ways? Maybe do a big brand new story mode again? New modes? Or hear me out, what if they made it 3D? I'm kidding, I don't want that. There was just so much iconic about Ultimate. I mean, the main theme, the amount of different modes it offered, the different ways they expanded upon the series, even down to the branding where we saw some of the best trailers that the franchise has ever produced. I mean, they had Luigi and Castlevania during the reveal for Simon Belmont. I honestly think ending the final fighter as Sora is one of the most elegant ways of sunsetting Ultimate and stands for everything it stood for. Sora, the character that brings the light and unites everyone, putting a final pin into the game that brought so much joy and united everyone. It might sound cheesy, and yeah, it's absolutely cheesy, but I think it really was the best final one they could have chosen. It's just so fitting. That's not to say that these factors can't be reproduced. Maybe whatever comes after the Switch ends up being an even bigger success and carries that same special feeling or magical vibe. Maybe Sakurai does return to direct one more game. The trailers will probably continue to be peak, that's probably never going to change. Maybe all of this stuff literally does repeat exactly the same way and we continue to get characters that we have been wanting for ages like Shrek, Saul Goodman, and more. But so much of the factors that made Ultimate feel so special were so specific to what the Switch was. The system that managed to do the impossible, building a library of games that were so special and included Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and helped it do the impossible. And I don't think that feeling can ever be truly replicated, or at least if it ever does, it won't feel as special as it did the first time. It was a once in a lifetime thing and a true end of an era. Super Smash Bros. Will continue, but Ultimate will always be its own thing ultimately. That was not an intentional pun. Okay, bye.